Lucas Grant stepped out of the elevator onto the 40th floor of Reed Technologies, his heart pounding. The gleaming glass and steel interior of the office was a stark contrast to the rundown neighborhood he'd grown up in. As he walked towards the reception desk, he couldn't help but feel like an imposter in his newly purchased suit. The receptionist, a polite woman with a practiced smile, directed him to the conference room. Lucas took a deep breath before entering, reminding himself that he'd earned this opportunity. The room was filled with people in expensive suits, all eyes turning to him as he entered. Tyler Reed, the CEO and founder of Reed Technologies, stood up to greet him. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Lucas Grant, our new special projects assistant," Tyler announced. Lucas scanned the room, noting the mix of curiosity and skepticism on the faces of his new colleagues. As the meeting progressed, Lucas found himself struggling to keep up with the rapid-fire discussions about market shares, emerging technologies, and profit margins. He felt out of his depth, but was determined not to show it. When Tyler asked for his input on a new app targeting low-income communities, Lucas hesitated before offering his perspective. "While the app's features are impressive," Lucas began, his voice steadier than he felt, "I'm not sure it addresses the real needs of the communities you're targeting. Many people in these areas don't have reliable internet access or smartphones capable of running such a complex app." The room fell silent for a moment before erupting into a heated discussion. Lucas couldn't tell if he'd made a good impression or a terrible mistake. Tyler, however, nodded thoughtfully, jotting down notes. As the day wore on, Lucas found himself overwhelmed by the sheer amount of technology surrounding him. The office was filled with cutting-edge gadgets and prototypes that he'd only ever read about online. He felt a mix of excitement and intimidation, wondering if he'd ever truly fit in here. At the end of the day, Lucas sat on a bench in a nearby park, his mind reeling from the events of the day. He pulled out his old, battered smartphone, a hand-me-down from his older sister, and scrolled through his contacts until he found Mr. Hartley, his high school computer science teacher. Lucas typed out a message. "Made it through my first day at Reed Technologies. Still can't believe I'm here. Thank you for believing in me." He hesitated for a moment before hitting send, remembering the countless hours Mr. Hartley had spent mentoring him, teaching him to code on the school's outdated computers. As he waited for the bus to take him back to his small apartment in a less glamorous part of the city, Lucas found himself thinking about the stark contrasts he'd witnessed today. The opulence of Reed Technologies' offices seemed worlds away from the struggling public schools and community centers of his childhood. He thought about his friends back home, many of whom had never even owned a computer. The excitement of his new job was tempered by a growing sense of responsibility. Lucas knew he was in a unique position to bridge two very different worlds, and he was determined to make the most of this opportunity. As the bus rattled along, Lucas made a silent promise to himself. He would work harder than anyone else at Reed Technologies, not just to prove his worth, but to find ways to use his new position to help the community he'd left behind. With renewed determination, he began mentally outlining ideas for projects that could make a real difference. The bus stopped a few blocks from his apartment, and as Lucas walked the rest of the way home, he couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and trepidation about what the future held. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in his life, he felt like he had the power to make a real change. With that thought, he climbed the stairs to his apartment, ready to prepare for whatever tomorrow might bring. Tyler Reed sat at the head of a long conference table, surrounded by investors and board members. The meeting had been dragging on for hours, with endless discussions about profit margins and market expansion. Despite his outward appearance of calm confidence, Tyler felt a growing sense of frustration. "Gentlemen, I understand your concerns about our Q3 projections," Tyler said, his voice carrying a hint of weariness. "But I believe our focus on innovation will pay off in the long run." One of the older board members leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Innovation is all well and good, Tyler, but we need to see concrete results. The shareholders are getting restless. Tyler nodded, fighting the urge to sigh. He'd built Reed Technologies from the ground up, driven by a vision of creating technology that could change lives. But lately, it felt like all anyone cared about was the bottom line. As the meeting finally adjourned, Tyler caught sight of Lucas hurrying down the hallway, a stack of papers in his arms. "Lucas," he called out, grateful for the distraction. "How's the networking event coming along?" Lucas turned, looking slightly flustered. "It's coming together, Mr. Reed. I've been working on some ideas to make it more engaging." Tyler raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh, let's hear them." As Lucas began explaining his ideas, Tyler found himself impressed by the young man's enthusiasm and fresh perspective. It was a stark contrast to the jaded attitudes he'd just endured in the boardroom. The day of the networking event arrived, and Tyler watched from the sidelines as Lucas navigated the room, introducing people and facilitating discussions. There was an earnestness to Lucas's interactions that stood out among the polished, often superficial exchanges typical of these events. Tyler overheard a conversation between Lucas and a group of executives. "But have you considered the potential impact of expanding access to these technologies in underserved communities?" Lucas was saying, his eyes alight with passion. "There's an untapped market there, not to mention the social benefits." The executives exchanged glances, some looking intrigued, others dismissive. Tyler found himself moving closer, curious to hear more. "That's all very idealistic," one executive said, "but the reality is, those markets aren't profitable enough to justify the investment." Lucas didn't back down. "With respect, sir, I think that's a short-sighted view. By investing in these communities now, we're not just opening up new markets, we're fostering innovation and creating loyal customers for the future." Tyler listened, torn between admiration for Lucas's conviction and concern about the potential fallout. He'd learned the hard way that challenging the status quo in this industry could be risky. As the event wound down, Tyler approached Lucas. "That was some speech you gave earlier," he said, keeping his tone neutral. Lucas looked up, a mix of determination and uncertainty in his eyes. "I hope I didn't overstep, Mr. Reed. It's just, I've seen firsthand the difference technology can make in people's lives, and also how many people are left behind." Tyler nodded slowly. "It's a complex issue, Lucas, but I appreciate your passion. Keep thinking about these ideas. Who knows, you might be onto something." As Tyler walked away, he found himself mulling over Lucas's words. The young man's perspective was undoubtedly naive in many ways, but there was also a kernel of truth that Tyler couldn't ignore. That night, as Tyler drove home, he found himself at a familiar crossroads. On one side was the pressure to meet investor expectations and maintain the company's growth. On the other was the idealism that had driven him to start the company in the first place, the belief that technology could be a force for good in the world. Lucas's words had stirred something in Tyler, reminding him of his own early days in the industry. He'd started out with big dreams of changing the world, but somewhere along the way, those dreams had been overshadowed by the relentless pursuit of profit and market share. As he pulled into his driveway, Tyler made a mental note to have a more in-depth conversation with Lucas about his ideas. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to balance the demands of the business world with the idealism of youth. It would be a challenging path, but as Tyler stepped out of his car, he felt a spark of excitement that he hadn't experienced in years. The annual Tech Forward conference was in full swing, with industry leaders from around the world gathered to discuss the future of technology. Tyler sat in the front row, his attention divided between the speakers on stage and the constant stream of emails on his phone. He glanced at his watch, noting that the panel on emerging markets and digital inclusion was about to begin. As the moderator introduced the panelists, Tyler was surprised to see Lucas take a seat on stage. He hadn't been aware that Lucas was participating in the conference beyond his organizational duties. The discussion began with the usual talking points about market expansion and technological infrastructure. Tyler found his attention wandering until Lucas cleared his throat and leaned towards his microphone. "I appreciate the points that have been made about the challenges of expanding into developing markets," Lucas began, his voice slightly shaky but gaining strength. "But I think we're missing a crucial aspect of this conversation: the human element." The room fell silent as Lucas continued, his words gaining momentum. "We sit here in our high-tech conference center discussing markets and profit margins, but out there are billions of people for whom access to basic technology could be life-changing. I've seen children sharing a single outdated computer in a community center, trying to do their homework. I've watched small business owners struggle to compete because they can't afford the tools we take for granted." Tyler sat up straighter, watching as Lucas's words began to captivate the audience. "The digital divide isn't just an abstract concept. It's a real barrier that's holding back human potential on a massive scale. And here's the thing: bridging that divide isn't just the right thing to do morally. It's also a smart business move. We're not just opening up new markets. We're fostering innovation, creating loyal customers, and tapping into a wealth of untapped talent." As Lucas finished speaking, the room erupted into a mix of applause and heated discussion. Tyler could see some nodding in agreement, while others wore expressions of skepticism or outright dismissal. The moderator, looking slightly flustered, tried to bring the discussion back to more familiar territory, but the energy in the room had shifted. For the rest of the panel, Lucas's words hung in the air, coloring every subsequent comment. As the session ended and people began filing out of the room, Tyler overheard snippets of conversation. "Idealistic nonsense," one executive scoffed. "He clearly doesn't understand the realities of the market." "I don't know," another responded. "He made some compelling points. Maybe we need to rethink our approach." Tyler found himself conflicted. Part of him was impressed by Lucas's passion and the impact of his words. Another part worried about the potential fallout. He'd worked hard to position Reed Technologies as a leader in the industry, and Lucas's speech could be seen as a challenge to the status quo. As he made his way through the conference center, Tyler was stopped by several colleagues and investors, all wanting to discuss Lucas's speech. Some were intrigued, others concerned. Tyler found himself carefully navigating these conversations, neither fully endorsing nor dismissing Lucas's ideas. That evening, Tyler returned home, his mind still buzzing from the day's events. As he walked through the door, his wife Emma greeted him with a kiss. "How was the conference?" she asked, noting the pensive look on his face. Tyler sighed, sinking into the couch. "Interesting. Challenging. You remember Lucas, the new assistant I hired?" Emma nodded, sitting beside him. "He gave a speech today about digital inclusion. Stirred up quite a bit of controversy." Tyler recounted the events of the day, watching Emma's reactions carefully. When he finished, Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know, it reminds me of the way you used to talk about technology when we first met. All those big ideas about changing the world." Tyler felt a pang of nostalgia mixed with something else. Regret, perhaps. "Things were simpler then," he said. "We didn't have shareholders to answer to, or a multi-billion-dollar company to run." Emma took his hand. "Maybe. But Tyler, isn't that why you started this company in the first place? To make a difference?" As Tyler lay in bed that night, sleep eluding him, he found himself wrestling with Emma's words and the memory of Lucas's impassioned speech. He'd built Reed Technologies into an industry giant, but at what cost? And more importantly, what would be its legacy? In the weeks following the Tech Forward conference, the tech industry buzzed with discussions about digital inclusion. Some companies, inspired by Lucas's speech, announced new initiatives aimed at bridging the digital divide. Others dismissed the idea as impractical idealism. Tyler found himself caught in the middle of this growing debate. His inbox was flooded with emails from various stakeholders, each pushing their own agenda. Some board members expressed concern about the company's image, while others saw an opportunity to position Reed Technologies as a leader in corporate social responsibility. One morning, as Tyler walked into his office, his assistant handed him a stack of press clippings. "You might want to take a look at these, sir," she said, her expression worried. Tyler skimmed through the articles, his frown deepening. While some praised Reed Technologies for fostering innovative thinking, others criticized the company for allowing an inexperienced idealist to speak on such a sensitive topic. As he pondered how to address these conflicting reactions, Tyler's phone rang. It was Marcus Blackwell, one of the company's largest investors. "Tyler, we need to talk," Marcus said, his tone brusque. "This digital inclusion nonsense is causing quite a stir. I've got concerns about where you're steering the company." Tyler felt a knot form in his stomach. "Marcus, I assure you, we're not making any hasty decisions. We're simply exploring new ideas." "Ideas that could tank our stock price," Marcus interrupted. "Listen, Tyler, I've backed you for years because you deliver results. But if you start chasing pipe dreams instead of profits, well, there are other tech companies out there that would be happy to have my investment." The implied threat hung in the air. Tyler ended the call with reassurances that he would keep investors' interests in mind, but the conversation left him unsettled. Later that day, Tyler sought out Lucas, finding him working late in one of the project rooms. Lucas looked up as Tyler entered, his expression a mix of determination and fatigue. "How's it going?" Tyler asked, gesturing to the papers and diagrams spread across the table. Lucas ran a hand through his hair. "It's challenging. I've been working on a proposal for a project that could bring affordable internet access to underserved communities. But every time I think I've solved one problem, 3 more pop up." Tyler nodded, understanding all too well the frustrations of innovation. "Lucas, I wanted to talk to you about the conference. Your speech has stirred up quite a reaction." Lucas straightened, a flicker of worry crossing his face. "I hope I didn't overstep, Mr. Reed. I just felt like someone needed to say something." "You didn't overstep," Tyler assured him, though part of him wondered if that was true. "But I need you to understand the complexities we're dealing with. Change doesn't happen overnight in this industry." Lucas's shoulders slumped slightly. "I understand. It's just, I keep thinking about the kids in my old neighborhood, how much difference even basic tech access could make for them." Tyler felt a pang of sympathy, remembering his own humble beginnings. "Keep working on your proposal," he said, "but let's focus on small, achievable goals for now. Rome wasn't built in a day." As Tyler left the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was letting Lucas down somehow. But with the pressure from investors mounting, he knew he had to tread carefully. That night, as Tyler drove home, he found himself taking a detour through a less affluent part of the city. As he stopped at a traffic light, he noticed a group of teenagers huddled around a single smartphone, clearly sharing access to the device. The sight stirred something in Tyler, reminding him of Lucas's words at the conference. He realized that while he'd been focused on market shares and profit margins, he'd lost sight of the real-world impact technology could have. As the light turned green, Tyler made a decision. He wouldn't abandon the idea of digital inclusion, but he needed to find a way to balance it with the realities of running a major corporation. It would be a delicate tightrope to walk, but Tyler was determined to try. He pulled out his phone and sent a quick message to Lucas. "Let's review your proposal tomorrow. I think it's time we started turning ideas into action." As he hit send, Tyler felt a mix of apprehension and excitement. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in years, He felt like he was steering his company towards something truly meaningful. The following weeks at Reed Technologies were marked by a palpable tension. Tyler found himself caught between his growing conviction about the importance of digital inclusion and the mounting pressure from investors and board members. One morning, Tyler called Lucas into his office. The young man entered, clutching a thick folder of notes and diagrams. "I've been reviewing your proposal," Tyler began, gesturing for Lucas to take a seat. "It's ambitious, I'll give you that." Lucas leaned forward eagerly. "I've been refining it based on our earlier discussions. I really think we could make a significant impact with this project." Tyler nodded, then sighed. "Lucas, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but we need to talk about the practicalities, the costs involved in setting up the infrastructure alone." "But Mr. Reed," Lucas interjected, his voice rising slightly, "if we partner with local organizations and leverage existing networks, we could significantly reduce those costs. And think about the long-term benefits. We'd be creating a whole new market of tech-savvy users." Tyler held up a hand. "I understand that, but we have shareholders to answer to. They're looking for immediate returns, not long-term social impact." Lucas's face fell, but he didn't back down. "With all due respect, sir, isn't that short-sighted? If we don't invest in these communities now, we're cutting ourselves off from future growth." The conversation continued, both men presenting their arguments with increasing passion. By the end, they had reached a tentative compromise, a scaled-down pilot project that would target a single community as a proof of concept. As Lucas left the office, his expression a mix of disappointment and determination, Tyler felt a twinge of guilt. He knew the young man had hoped for more, but the realities of running a publicly traded company couldn't be ignored. Later that evening, Tyler arrived home to find his wife, Emma, waiting for him with a concerned expression. "Rough day?" she asked, noting the lines of stress on his face. Tyler sank into a chair, loosening his tie. "You could say that. I feel like I'm being pulled in a dozen different directions." Emma sat beside him, placing a hand on his arm. "Talk to me. What's going on?" Tyler explained the situation. Lucas's passion for digital inclusion, the pushback from investors, his own conflicted feelings. As he spoke, Emma listened attentively, her brow furrowed in thought. When he finished, Emma was quiet for a moment before speaking. "Tyler, do you remember why you started this company in the first place?" Tyler blinked, caught off guard by the question. "Of course. I wanted to create technology that could change people's lives." "Exactly," Emma said softly. "Not to make shareholders rich, but to make a difference. I know things are more complicated now, but maybe this is an opportunity to get back to those roots." Tyler felt a surge of emotion at his wife's words. She was right, of course. Somewhere along the way, he'd lost sight of his original vision. "But the investors," he began. Emma cut him off gently. "The investors invested in you, Tyler, in your vision and your leadership. Maybe it's time to remind them of that." As the night wore on, Tyler found himself mulling over Emma's words. He thought about the excitement he'd felt in the early days of Reed Technologies, the belief that he could change the world through technology. The next morning, Tyler arrived at the office early. He spent the first hour reviewing financial reports and market projections, trying to find a way to balance the company's financial obligations with his rekindled desire to make a real impact. As the office began to fill with employees, Tyler made a decision. He called his assistant and asked her to schedule a meeting with the board of directors. It was time to take a stand. Just before the meeting, Tyler sought out Lucas. He found the young man hunched over his computer, working on what looked like a complex network diagram. "Lucas," Tyler said, causing the younger man to look up in surprise, "I wanted to let you know, I'm presenting your project to the board today." The full version, not the scaled-down pilot. Lucas's eyes widened. Really? But I thought... Tyler held up a hand. I've been doing a lot of thinking. You were right. We can't afford to be short-sighted. It's time for Reed Technologies to remember its roots and start leading by example. As Lucas's face broke into a grin, Tyler felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He knew the meeting ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in years, he felt truly aligned with his company's mission. With a deep breath, Tyler turned and headed towards the boardroom, ready to fight for a vision of technology that could truly change the world. The boardroom was tense as Tyler stood at the head of the table, facing the skeptical gazes of his board members. He could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on him, but for once, he felt prepared to push back. "Gentlemen," Tyler began, his voice steady and confident, "I've called this meeting to discuss a new direction for Reed Technologies, one that I believe will not only secure our future, but also fulfill the promise of what technology can do for society." He launched into a presentation, outlining Lucas's project for digital inclusion. As he spoke, Tyler could see the board members' expression shift from skepticism to curiosity, and in some cases, to outright opposition. "Tyler," interrupted Richard Holloway, one of the most vocal board members, "this all sounds very noble, but how does it translate to our bottom line? Our shareholders aren't interested in charity work." Tyler had anticipated this question. "It's not charity, Richard. It's an investment in our future. By bringing technology to underserved communities, we're not just opening up new markets. We're fostering innovation, creating loyal customers, and tapping into a wealth of untapped talent." He pulled up a series of projections on the screen. "Our analysis shows that while initial costs will be high, the long-term returns could be substantial. More importantly, it positions Reed Technologies as a leader in corporate responsibility, which in today's market is increasingly valuable." The room erupted into a heated discussion. Some board members nodded in agreement, while others voiced their concerns loudly. Tyler stood his ground, addressing each point with well-prepared responses. "Gentlemen," Tyler said, raising his voice slightly to be heard over the din, "I understand your concerns, but I founded this company with the belief that technology could change lives for the better. It's time we remembered that mission." As Tyler concluded his presentation, the room fell into a tense silence. He could see the board members exchanging glances, some nodding slowly, others frowning in disapproval. Finally, Sandra Chen, one of the newer board members, spoke up. "I have to say, Tyler, I'm impressed. This is the kind of bold thinking that made Reed Technologies a leader in the first place. You have my support." Others began to voice their agreement, though some remained skeptical. As the meeting adjourned, Tyler knew he had won a significant battle, but the war was far from over. As he left the boardroom, Tyler found Lucas waiting anxiously in the hallway. "How did it go?" the young man asked, his eyes wide with anticipation. Tyler allowed himself a small smile. "It's a start, Lucas. We've got a long road ahead, but the board has agreed to move forward with the project." Lucas's face lit up with excitement, but Tyler held up a hand. "Don't celebrate just yet. We've got a lot of work to do to make this succeed. Are you ready?" Lucas nodded emphatically. "More than ready, Mr. Reed. Thank you for believing in this." As they walked back to their offices, Tyler felt a sense of renewed purpose. He knew the coming months would be challenging, filled with long hours and difficult decisions. But for the first time in years, he felt truly excited about the future of his company. That evening, as Tyler drove home, he found himself taking a detour through the same neighborhood he had driven through weeks earlier. He saw the same group of teenagers, still huddled around a single smartphone. But this time, instead of feeling a vague sense of guilt, Tyler felt determination. "Soon," he murmured to himself, We're going to change things for you." As he pulled into his driveway, Tyler saw Emma waiting for him on the porch. She took one look at his face and smiled. "You did it, didn't you?" she asked. Tyler nodded, feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. "It's just the beginning, but yes, we're going to try to make a real difference." Emma hugged him tightly. "I'm proud of you, Tyler. This is the man I married, the one who wanted to change the world." As they went inside, Tyler felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. He knew the path ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in a long time, he was certain it was the right one. The following week saw a flurry of activity at Reed Technologies. Tyler and Lucas found themselves working side by side, their initial mentor-mentee relationship evolving into a partnership of equals. They spent long hours in strategy meetings, poring over data and refining their plans for the digital inclusion project. One crisp morning, Tyler and Lucas set out to visit several underserved communities in the city. Their first stop was a community center in a neighborhood not far from where Lucas grew up. As they walked through the doors, they were greeted by the sight of outdated computers and a handful of people waiting their turn to use them. The center's director, a woman named Maria, welcomed them warmly. "We're grateful for any help we can get," Maria said, leading them through the center. "Our resources are stretched thin, and the demand for computer access is only growing." Tyler listened intently as Maria explained the challenges they faced, from unreliable internet connections to a lack of up-to-date hardware. As he watched a group of children excitedly crowd around a single computer, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Lucas, meanwhile, was in his element. He chatted easily with the center's patrons, asking about their needs and experiences. Tyler watched as the young man's face lit up with each conversation, his mind clearly racing with ideas. Their next stop was a local high school, where they met with the principal and a group of students. The school's computer lab was better equipped than the community center, but still far behind what Tyler knew was standard in more affluent areas. One student, a bright-eyed girl named Jasmine, approached them after their tour. "Mr. Reed," she said, her voice tinged with excitement, "I heard about your project. Do you really think you can bring better tech to schools like ours?" Tyler found himself moved by the hope in her eyes. "That's certainly our goal, Jasmine. We believe everyone deserves access to the tools they need to succeed in the digital age." As they left the school, Lucas turned to Tyler. "Did you see how excited those kids were? Imagine what they could accomplish with the right resources." Tyler nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. "We need to think beyond just providing hardware," he mused. "We need to create programs, mentorship opportunities." Their final stop of the day was a small business incubator in another underserved neighborhood. Here, they met aspiring entrepreneurs struggling to compete in an increasingly digital marketplace. One young man, Marcus, shared his frustration at trying to launch an e-commerce business with limited resources. "I have the ideas and the drive," he explained. "But without reliable internet and the right software, I'm always 2 steps behind my competitors." As they drove back to the office, Tyler and Lucas were both quiet, processing everything they'd seen and heard. The scale of the challenge ahead was daunting, but Tyler felt more invigorated than he had in years. "You know," Tyler said, breaking the silence, "when I started Reed Technologies, I had this idea that we could democratize technology, make it accessible to everyone. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that vision." Lucas looked over at him. "It's not too late to reclaim it," he said softly. Tyler nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "No, it's not, and I think we've got the right team to do it." Back at the office, they dove into work with renewed energy. Lucas began outlining a comprehensive plan that went beyond just providing hardware. It included educational programs, mentorship opportunities, and partnerships with local organizations. Tyler, meanwhile, focused on the business side of things, working to secure the necessary funding and resources. He reached out to other tech companies, proposing collaborations and partnerships to amplify their impact. As the days turned into weeks, Tyler found himself constantly amazed by Lucas's insights and creativity. The young man's understanding of the communities they were trying to serve, combined with his technical expertise, proved invaluable. One evening, as they were working late in Tyler's office, Lucas looked up from his laptop with a grin. "You know," he said, "when I first started here, I never imagined we'd be doing something like this." Tyler chuckled. "Neither did I, to be honest. But I'm glad we are." As they continued to work, Tyler realized that this project had done more than just reignite his passion for technology. It had given him a new perspective on leadership and the true potential of his company. With Lucas by his side, he felt ready to take on the challenges ahead and truly make a difference in the world. As the digital inclusion project began to take shape, Tyler and Lucas found themselves facing a host of unexpected challenges. The initial excitement of their new alliance was tested by the harsh realities of implementing such an ambitious plan. One morning, Tyler called a meeting with key investors to present the project's progress and seek additional funding. The boardroom was tense as Tyler outlined their achievements and future plans. "While we've made significant strides," Tyler explained, pointing to a series of charts on the screen, "we've encountered some unforeseen obstacles that require additional resources." Marcus Blackwell, the investor who had previously threatened to pull his support, leaned forward with a frown. "Tyler, we agreed to give this project a chance, but these numbers are concerning. The ROI timeline is much longer than we anticipated." Tyler took a deep breath, steeling himself for the pushback. "I understand your concerns, Marcus, but we're not just building a product here. We're investing in communities, in future customers and innovators. The long-term benefits far outweigh the short-term costs." Another investor chimed in, her voice skeptical. "That's all well and good, but our shareholders are looking for concrete results, not feel-good stories." The meeting continued for hours, with Tyler defending the project against increasingly pointed questions. By the end, he had managed to secure tentative continued support, but it was clear that patience was wearing thin. As Tyler left the boardroom feeling drained, he found Lucas waiting for him. The young man's expression fell as he saw Tyler's face. "It didn't go well, did it?" he asked. Tyler sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It could have been worse. They're still on board for now, but we need to show results, and fast." Meanwhile, Lucas was facing challenges of his own. As news of the project spread, he found himself under scrutiny from members of his old community. One afternoon, as he was visiting the community center to oversee the installation of new equipment, he was confronted by a group of local residents. "Who do you think you are, coming in here like some big shot?" one man demanded. "You think just because you work for some fancy tech company now, you know what's best for us?" Lucas was taken aback by the hostility. "I'm just trying to help," he explained, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "We're bringing resources that can make a real difference here." An older woman stepped forward, her eyes narrowed. "We've heard promises before, young man. Companies come in, make a big show of helping, and then disappear when things get tough. How do we know you're any different?" The confrontation left Lucas shaken. He realized that earning the trust of the community would be just as challenging as developing the technology itself. That evening, Tyler and Lucas met in Tyler's office, both looking weary. They shared their experiences of the day, each feeling the weight of the obstacles they faced. "Maybe we bit off more than we can chew," Lucas said quietly, staring out the window at the city skyline. Tyler was silent for a moment, considering. Then he turned to Lucas with a determined look. "No, we didn't. We knew this wouldn't be easy, but that doesn't mean it's not worth doing." He stood up, pacing the room as he spoke. We need to approach this differently. We've been so focused on the technology, we've neglected the human element. We need to involve the communities more directly, make them partners in this project rather than just recipients. Lucas nodded slowly, his eyes lighting up as he caught on to Tyler's train of thought. You're right. And we need to be more transparent with the investors. Show them the real-world impact we're having, not just the numbers. As they began to brainstorm new approaches, Tyler felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he also knew they were on the right path. Lucas, Tyler said as their meeting wound down, I want you to know something. Regardless of how this turns out, I'm proud of what we're trying to do here, and I'm glad to have you as a partner in this. Lucas smiled, looking touched by Tyler's words. Thank you, Mr. Reed. That means a lot. As they left the office that night, both men felt a mix of trepidation and determination. The challenges they faced were daunting, but they were committed to seeing their vision through, no matter the obstacles. The day of the project's official launch arrived with a mix of anticipation and nervous energy. The grand ballroom of San Francisco's most prestigious hotel was filled with a diverse crowd: tech industry leaders, community representatives, investors, and media personnel. The air buzzed with conversations and speculation about Reed Technologies' ambitious digital inclusion initiative. Tyler stood backstage, adjusting his tie for the 1,000th time. He glanced at Lucas, who was pacing back and forth, muttering key points of his speech under his breath. You ready for this? Tyler asked, placing a reassuring hand on Lucas's shoulder. Lucas took a deep breath and nodded. As ready as I'll ever be. You? Tyler managed a small smile. Let's go change the world. As they stepped onto the stage, the room fell into an expectant hush. Tyler approached the podium first, surveying the audience with a calm demeanor that belied his inner nervousness. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice clear and confident. Thank you for joining us today. We're here to announce a project that we believe will reshape the landscape of technology access and digital literacy in our communities. Tyler outlined the broad strokes of the initiative, emphasizing the potential for economic growth and innovation. He spoke of the visits to underserved communities, the partnerships they'd forged with local organizations, and the comprehensive approach they were taking to address the digital divide. As he introduced Lucas, Tyler felt a swell of pride. And now, I'd like to introduce the driving force behind this initiative, the man whose vision and passion have pushed us to think bigger and do better, Lucas Grant. Lucas took the stage, his initial nervousness giving way to passionate conviction as he began to speak. He shared personal anecdotes from his childhood, painting a vivid picture of the challenges faced by those on the wrong side of the digital divide. This isn't just about providing computers or internet access, Lucas declared, his voice resonating through the hall. It's about opening doors, about giving people the tools they need to compete, to innovate, to thrive in the digital age. It's about ensuring that the next great idea, the next world-changing innovation, isn't lost because someone didn't have access to the right technology. As Lucas concluded his speech, the room erupted into applause. Tyler could see nods of approval from many of the tech leaders present, and even some of the more skeptical investors seemed impressed. The QA session that followed was intense. Journalists pressed for details on implementation timelines and funding allocation. Community leaders asked pointed questions about long-term commitment and community involvement. Investors inquired about projected returns and risk management strategies. Tyler and Lucas fielded the questions as a team, their responses complementing each other seamlessly. Where Tyler provided strategic insights and business acumen, Lucas offered on-the-ground perspectives and technical expertise. As the event wound down, Tyler felt a mix of relief and exhilaration. They had made their case, laid out their vision. Now came the hard part, turning that vision into reality. The aftermath of the launch was a whirlwind. Social media buzzed with discussions about Reed Technologies' initiative. Tech blogs dissected every aspect of the project, with opinions ranging from enthusiastic support to cynical skepticism. As Tyler was leaving the venue, he was cornered by James Harrington, one of the company's most influential investors. Tyler braced himself for criticism, but was surprised by Harrington's words. "I've got to hand it to you, Tyler," Harrington said, his tone grudgingly respectful. "You've taken a big risk here, but I think you might be onto something. Don't make me regret supporting this." Tyler nodded, feeling a small sense of victory. "Thank you, James. We won't let you down." Later that evening, as Tyler and Lucas were reviewing the day's events in Tyler's office, they were interrupted by a call from Emma. "Tyler," Emma's voice was urgent. "Have you seen the news? There's a story breaking about one of your major investors. It doesn't look good." Tyler quickly pulled up a news site on his computer, his heart sinking as he read the headline. One of their key backers was being accused of unethical business practices in developing countries, the very regions Reed Technologies was aiming to help with their new initiative. As the implications of this news sank in, Tyler and Lucas exchanged a look of dismay. They had overcome so many obstacles to get to this point, and now, just as they were gaining momentum, a new crisis threatened to derail everything they had worked for. Tyler leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. This wasn't just a PR nightmare. It had the potential to undermine the very core of their project's mission. As the night wore on, Tyler realized that the true test of their commitment to ethical technology and digital inclusion was just beginning. The following days were a blur of crisis management meetings and frantic phone calls. The news of their investors' unethical practices had spread like wildfire, threatening to tarnish the reputation of Reed Technologies and their digital inclusion project before it had even truly begun. Tyler sat in his office, rubbing his temples as he listened to his PR team outline potential damage control strategies. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on him. "We need to distance ourselves from this investor immediately," one team member suggested. "Issue a statement condemning their actions and severing all ties." Another disagreed, "But they're one of our biggest backers. Cutting them off could jeopardize the entire project." As the debate continued, Tyler's mind wandered to a conversation he'd had with Lucas earlier that morning. The young man had been uncharacteristically quiet, his usual energy dampened by the unfolding crisis. "Mr. Reed," Lucas had said, his voice low and determined, "I've been thinking, what if we could turn this crisis into an opportunity?" Tyler's attention snapped back to the present. He held up a hand, silencing the ongoing discussion. "I think we've been approaching this all wrong," he said, a new resolve in his voice. "We're not going to run from this. We're going to face it head on." He outlined a bold plan, one that would not only address the current crisis, but potentially reshape the entire narrative around their project. The next morning, Tyler called an emergency press conference. As he stood before a sea of reporters, cameras flashing, he took a deep breath and began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here today to address the recent allegations against one of our investors. Let me be clear, the practices they're accused of go against everything Reed Technologies stands for." A murmur rippled through the crowd as Tyler continued. "But rather than simply distancing ourselves from this situation, we've decided to take action. Effective immediately, Reed Technologies will be launching a comprehensive audit of all our investors and partners." He went on to explain that they would be implementing new, stringent ethical guidelines for all business relationships. Any partners found to be engaging in unethical practices would be cut off, and the funds would be redirected into expanding their digital inclusion projects in the affected areas. "We started this project with the goal of bridging the digital divide," Tyler declared. "But we now realize that true inclusion goes beyond just providing technology. It's about ensuring that every aspect of our work from our business practices to our partnerships, aligns with our core mission of empowerment and equality. As Tyler concluded his speech, the room erupted into a frenzy of questions, but before he could address them, Lucas stepped up to the podium. "If I may," Lucas began, his voice steady despite the nerves Tyler could see in his eyes. "I'd like to add something." Tyler nodded, stepping aside to let Lucas speak. "I grew up in a community that often felt forgotten by the tech industry," Lucas said. "When we started this project, I saw it as a chance to change that, but today, we're taking it a step further." Lucas went on to announce a new initiative, a community oversight board that would work alongside Reed Technologies to ensure transparency and accountability in all their digital inclusion efforts. "We're not just bringing technology to underserved communities," Lucas declared. "We're bringing them a seat at the table." The press conference ended with a burst of applause. As Tyler and Lucas left the stage, they were immediately swarmed by reporters and industry insiders, all clamoring for more details. In the days that followed, the story took on a life of its own. What had started as a potential PR disaster had transformed into a narrative of corporate responsibility and community empowerment. Other tech companies began to follow suit, announcing their own ethical audits and inclusion initiatives. Weeks later, Tyler and Lucas found themselves back in the community center where their journey had begun. They were there to install new equipment, part of the expanded project funded by the redirected investments. As they worked, Maria, the center's director, approached them with a smile. "You know," she said, "when you first came here talking about changing things, I was skeptical. We've heard big promises before. But this," she gestured around at the new computers and the eager faces of the community members learning to use them. "This is real change." Tyler and Lucas exchanged a look, a mix of pride and humility in their eyes. They both knew that their work was far from over. There would be more challenges, more obstacles to overcome. But in that moment, seeing the tangible impact of their efforts, they felt a renewed sense of purpose. As they left the center that evening, Lucas turned to Tyler. "You know, Mr. Reed," he said with a grin, "when I first started working for you, I never imagined we'd end up here." Tyler laughed, clapping Lucas on the shoulder. "Neither did I, Lucas, but I'm glad we did." Together they walked towards the setting sun, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring, secure in the knowledge that they were on the right path, a path of innovation, inclusion, and genuine change.